Welcome to Pathways, a career podcast from the Idaho State University Career Center. I'm your host, Mark Beaver. Today, we're speaking with Peter Pruett, Director of Zoo Idaho in Pocatello. I've been fortunate enough to meet Peter through multiple friends and acquaintances, and I've been able to pick up pieces of his story along the way, and I was just always intrigued about how one becomes a zookeeper. And though Peter's pathway has been somewhat circuitous, he mostly had an idea of a direction he wanted to go. What's really interesting is his perspective on some of the chances and the risks and opportunities he took along the way. Please settle in, listen to our conversation with Peter. Hey, Peter, how you doing today?
Doing great, Mark. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for coming in.
You bet.
Yeah. So on this show, I often will be interviewing people with position titles that I don't think anyone ever really thinks about when they're a kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one says, I want to grow up to be the vice president of some division at a university, right? Like these very kind of like niche titles. But I do think a lot of people grow up thinking, I want to be a zookeeper.
Oh, yeah. I think zookeeping is kind of like a firefighter or a police officer. You know, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a zookeeper. You know, and then there's people who want to be a veterinarian as well. So.
Right. And so, I mean, I'm wondering with my child's perspective, and, I probably then assumed and still assume that your job is, like you wake up, you go to the zoo, you put on a tuxedo, you go dance with some penguins for a little bit, have a time, maybe go over, play with some bears and monkeys. Obviously, these are not at your zoo, but can you tell us maybe a little bit more of like the reality of what does the director of a zoo do?
Oh, absolutely. And you're almost spot on. You forgot that we pet the bears and wrestle with some of the, I started as an elephant keeper. Yeah, we got to play with the elephants every day. Mm-hmm. Now, but you're right. Everyone thinks that we get to do a lot of things with these cool animals that you typically don't do, and they're wild animals. Mm-hmm. So they've been in captivity. A lot of exotics have been born into captivity, but they're still wild. Generations and generations until an animal's domesticated.
Right.
So we don't get to play with the animals like people hope we do.
Yeah.
I'll start off with what a typical keeper day is.
Yeah.
You come in and how I like it is, especially if with our zoo, we're small enough that we don't have individual departments. I've got 3 full-time keepers, and that's it for Zoo Idaho. And then we have some seasonal and variable hour positions. And in the morning, they kind of get together, talk about some of the happenings of the zoo, what's going on with the animals. If we've got an animal that's sick or an elderly animal, catching up on that. And then they decide how their day is going to go. As a small staff, we have to be super flexible. So everyone takes part in the entire operation for husbandry and all that. So they decide what to do. And the next thing you do, of course, you got to go out and you check to make sure all our animals are alive and in their exhibits. And then after that, you start work. And it's a lot of cleaning, If we've got some big animals, it's raking up yards, it's hosing down exhibits and holding and prepping diets. And it's not as glamorous as you think. You do get dirty. You get hot. You get sweaty. And in between all of the cleaning, you get to spend some time to work with the animals. We do a lot of training, which is operant conditioning based on positive reinforcement. If you see some of these like SeaWorld and you see these marine mammals doing these little presentations, that's the gist of what we do with our animals as well. We're not training them for a show, but we're training them for very specific purposes, shifting on and off exhibit. Another one is opening their mouths. We want to be able to see their teeth and their gums, and it's all geared towards the health of the animal. And then, of course, I really focus in on our staff paying attention to our guests and saying hi to our guests and talking with the guests. Because in the end, we want people to develop a connection, not just to our animals or Zoo Idaho, but the world around them, the environment around them. And you develop that connection way better if you talk to a person versus reading it on a sign. Mm-hmm. Then at the end of the day, you kind of do everything in reverse. Sure. I prefer, if we can, with a lot of our animals, I prefer to feed them multiple times during a day. So like our carnivores, omnivores, etc., they get fed twice, in the morning and then the afternoon. And then you have to do another live check to make sure everything is okay and they're still in their exhibit. And then you end up with the day, you sit down and you work on some daily logs for our record keeping, and hopefully you get out in 8 hours.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, so that brings up a good point. Hopefully you get out in 8 hours. I mean, so your position as a director is obviously different than your keepers that you have out there. So, what extra responsibilities do you have as a director that you wouldn't have as a keeper, and how does that affect that 8 hours situation?
It's a great question, and it's going to be different depending on the size of the zoo that you're at. So for us, I am one of 7 full-time people at the zoo, and so I'm going to wear all kinds of different hats. And one of my primary roles as the director is, of course, we need to have all our paperwork and policies in place. I need to make sure that we have the staffing levels that we need to have, and we are also a city entity, so I deal with all the policies and procedures within a city. Every year, we're hiring our summer help, our seasonal help, but there's all the kinds of paperwork that goes into this whole process. Every year we're looking at budgets, we're looking at fundraising and development and marketing, because we're a smaller zoo. I don't have people that take on that role. And then when we look at our basically 3 departments, we've got our keepers, our education department, our maintenance department. I end up helping all 3 depending on need. So like this today, I was out working in the yards. I had to change shoes because they were a tad bit dirty. There's been times where I've been out. We're working on a gift shop. I've sat down and helped on the construction of the gift shop. And when we've got some outreach programs or tours on zoo grounds that our ed curator can't take care of because she's got other things that she needs to do, I'm out there being a part-time educator as well. So it's all I basically have run into all kinds of responsibilities that the other 3 areas do, plus my own. So it keeps a person busy.
Did you have any background in a lot of those areas, like marketing? Because I know, like, that aspect that you're talking about, the zoo is always putting on events, right? Fundraising events,
right.
But they're like, I know from working in the nonprofit world, a lot goes in. To those events.
Yep.
And so, I mean, from the actual, bringing together the different stakeholders who might be able to help put it on, to the marketing, to coming up with like the actual kind of fundraising development side of things. And it seems like you have to have a hand, at least to some degree, in all of that. So did you have any experience with this, or where did you get the ability to kind of fill into those roles?
So, my first 2 zoos that I worked at were significantly larger than the last 2. And as I started, the only type of event or marketing or even development projects that I participated in was, hey, we've got this beastly feast and we need someone to talk about this jaguar. Hey, Peter, do you want to come in and do this? And so you stand out there and you're in your zookeeper uniform, and all of these people are walking. It's a black tie event. Right, and you've got tuxedos and gowns, and you're standing there and you're talking to the guests as they move by, and you kind of pick up some things off of that because you're having a conversation, and you got to be an active listener, right? So you're listening to what the people are telling you, and you kind of carry that with you. And as I moved to my previous zoo, it was significantly smaller, and then you took a much more active role with an event. An event is actually very similar to working with animals. You can plan everything that you want, but something's not going to go right.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always going to be a hiccup.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with an animal. Anyone who has to work linearly, A, B, C, then D, don't become a zookeeper.
Right.
Don't go into marketing or event planning or development, because things happen.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to move on the fly. And I think just by participating and doing, you pick up things and be open-minded about it and approach everything as a learning experience. Yeah. And it's the same thing with development. Initially, I started off writing some grants, and when you go to grad school, you learn a little bit about grant writing, because that's a lot of your research is funded through the grants. Grant writing isn't necessarily difficult. It's like scientific writing. There's a format, there's a pattern to just about every grant that you write, and it's actually gotten a lot easier now that everything is online. I can remember writing a 25-page grant for $10,000. Yeah. Now it's you just click through and they want 2,000 words, and then up to 1,000. So it's the whole process has been streamlined, and I appreciate that as a grant writer. And I also understand when you have a lot of these foundations, the sheer amount of grants that they're seeing, that they need to make, they need to look through that as quick as possible. And again, the first grant that you write, guess what? It's going to be a little bit of a struggle, and the second one gets a little bit easier. The third one gets a little bit easier. And then as you move through and you're looking at some bigger types of donation requests where you actually go out and you talk to people, that's the easy part. If you're passionate about your job, it's going to be really easy to sit down and talk to someone about, say, a new black bear exhibit. And they're going to see that passion in your voice and feel the excitement that you're feeling. And then it turns around and you have to stop and go, oh, by the way, can you give us $500,000? Yeah. I'm still not comfortable asking people for sums of money, and it takes time. It's not like you have one conversation and go, oh, by the way, can you give us X amount of dollars? It takes a year or 2 years to progress to that point, but it's still hard to actually ask someone or some organization for a lot of money.
Yeah. I definitely found that working in the nonprofit world, like exactly what you were saying is, I would feel so much better talking to someone about why this program is important and like how, like just the domino effect, the cascading effects that this could have in the community. And, but once you get to that part of, and we're going to need some money to do it, it's very uncomfortable. And I think, it's maybe we're alike in that way. And I think a lot of other people are not so uncomfortable with that.
Right.
And, that's, blessing, I'm sure it's also a skill that can be developed. Something I think you've gotten at is, it's a little bit of to gain these skills has been kind of just by necessity. Right. The necessity of working with a smaller organization. And once again, just to relate it to some similar work I've done for bigger organizations, you might have a marketing person and you can just kind of go tie in with them, figure out some stuff. But when you're working for a smaller organization, by necessity, it's kind of all hands on deck. You need to have a little bit of, you need to do a little bit here, a little bit there. And you kind of, some things maybe you're like, oh, I'm actually good at that. I never thought I would be good at marketing, but I guess I have a knack for it. It never was interesting to me.
And I think that's kind of the key point right there. It's weird to think it's nearly 30 years ago when I first started within the zoos. And if you would have asked me what a marketing plan was, I would have, why do I need to know that? I'm working with these cool elephants over here. I just cleaned a rhino yard. A marketing plan, but that's someone else's job. And would I have figured out that I would have actually had to ask someone what a marketing plan was? No, not at all. And I think it's an important lesson that we need to grow and evolve within our professional career. How could you still be in the same spot doing the same thing 30 years from now? You just can't. You got to be open to try different things and, be willing to put yourself in an uncomfortable position, because how can you grow, or how can you get a measure of not only who you are, but what things around you are if you don't end up in an uncomfortable spot? Life isn't comfortable.
Right. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Peter Pruett, Director of Zoo Idaho in Pocatello, Idaho. So I think that's a pretty what you were just saying about how could you stay in a position for 30 years and not grow. I think that, some people that might be kind of appealing, right?
Right.
Not have to deal with that uncomfortable situation of trying something that maybe I'm not confident with, I'm not interested in. But like I was saying, I've found many things interesting that I never thought I would like up until that point, just by necessity of being kind of pushed into it. And it's really opened me up to kind of just trying more things at work that are out of my scope of my job duties. But I'll look for opportunities to kind of take on different things just to see, again, maybe an extra skill set, see if it's interesting to me. Maybe, figure out something more about myself that even if I don't like that, can help me grow in other areas a little bit more. So you were just saying you've been working with zoos for 30 years. So maybe we can go way back to that thing I was talking about earlier about kids wanting to be a zookeeper. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
That's a great one. I think for a little bit of time, I wanted to be a meteorologist. But
like on the evening news,
right? Or the one that's actually supplying all the data to the newscaster, right?
Did you know what that was? As a kid?
Barely.
Okay. All right.
But the thing about this is I've never, even up to the first stint as a zookeeper, I was there for 5 years, and I went back to grad school because I'm like, hey, I wonder if there's something else out there. And I realized, after about a 6-year break that I'd rather be outside. I'm sitting in my office at a university in Philadelphia looking out at the rain in November going, I don't want to be here. I want to be outside in that bad weather. And that's when you kind of realize that that's what I wanted to do. And again, being willing to explore something else, and then coming back and saying, yeah, I really did want to be a zookeeper, but I finally decided that I wanted to try my hand at zookeeping. I think is between my junior and senior year in college.
Okay.
So, excuse me. So I grew up in Northwest Iowa, and we had a farm, and we've always been in and around agriculture, and I liked being outside. I liked working in and around animals and outside. My dad is always, this was in the 80s, don't be a farmer, because it's a tough life.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's hard work. And I'm like, well, what's the next best thing? And I'm like, holy cow, that'd be kind of cool to be working with some of these animals. And we lived about 2 hours north of Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
And they've got the Henry Dorley Zoo there, which is an insanely fantastic zoo. And I don't think people realize just how amazing that zoo is in the upper Midwest. I would, the San Diego Zoo gets a lot of credit because they're really good at marketing. The Henry Dorley Zoo didn't necessarily push the marketing, but I'd put that up as one of the best in the world. Yeah. And so we were able to go down there. I've family that lived in and around that area. So you kind of grew up visiting the Henry Dorley Zoo, and you're like, yeah, that'd be a cool job to do. And graduated college with a degree in biology, and I had a friend who had moved down to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he kept calling me up and said, hey, Peter, you need to come down to Tulsa. You can get a job in 2 weeks. I guarantee you can get a job in 2 weeks.
Yeah, very enticing to
Oh, yeah,
a
totally.
young person.
And I'm like, no, I'm like, this is 4 months after I graduated. No way, I'm not going to get a job in 2 weeks. Oh, yeah, Peter, they don't work like we do down here, and you're like, whatever. 6 months later, I'm finally going, okay, is there a zoo down there? Yeah. And I went down there, and well before the internet and finding jobs on the internet. And I went to the office and talked with the general curator there and just asked if there was any positions available. And he goes, yeah, we're looking for an elephant keeper. Do you have any experience with elephants? And I laughed and said, nah, I just graduated, but I grew up on a farm. Does that count? No. I'm like, oh, okay. And I go, do you have any intern opportunities? And he's like, yeah, sure. We're always looking for interns. And I wasn't even thinking. I didn't want to work with great apes. I think every kid in college or post-college wants to do an internship with great apes, with chimpanzees or gorillas or orangutans, because they're really cool. I'm like, nah.
Charismatic. Yeah.
Right. I go, what about carnivores or, some hoof stock? Oh, yeah, we'll hook you up with the curator. And it just happened to be she was also the curator over elephants, and started an internship there at $700 to my name. My friend let me live with them for 3 months for $100 a month for room and board, and fantastic opportunity. And 2 weeks later, a curator goes, technically this position closed today, but I called HR and it's open. You go down there and take the day off and apply for it. And instead of 2 weeks, it took a month, 2 more weeks for the hiring process. And once I got into it, I absolutely loved it. Hard work. You're in the Oklahoma sun. In the summer, it's 95 degrees by 11 a.m. and the humidity is 98%. Oof. But it was great fun, and the experiences I had there really set my future within zoos. And what it was is, it wasn't luck. I think you when you find an opportunity, if you want to do something, find that opportunity and take a chance. It helped significantly that I had friends down there in Tulsa and had a place for me to stay. But there's ways to figure out, housing and food and all that other good stuff. But you take that opportunity and you make the best of it. And once I got into it, it's a great experience. It's hard work. I've always been in the large mammal end of the zoo world. Hard work. We can tease herpetologists and the folks in the bird departments because they don't have to pick up as heavy stuff as we do. But their job is challenging in different ways than the typical large mammal or primate type person. So
yeah. And just to, as you're telling that story, my thought was, and just to think, what if you would have been too scared,
right,
to do that? Because that is, right. You did have a friend down there, but still, there's a risk involved in that move. But I guess what's the risk if you don't go?
Right.
You never know. So
right.
The risk is you go back
right.
to where you started, possibly, and that the amount of doors not being afraid of failure, and even maybe kind of putting failure into a better framework of, if I go down there and come back, I'm not a failure.
No.
The people in my town aren't going to say, oh, there's old Peter. He failed at being a zookeeper.
Right? He couldn't hack it.
In the big city.
As opposed to, in the big city, as opposed to understanding that I gained a new experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were open, like you said.
Yep.
You went in, you said, what do you got? Can you do this? You were honest. Not really. I'll take something at an intern level. And that kind of being open to the experience.
Yeah.
Think how many gates that may have opened for you going forward.
Oh, totally. And, I think back too, prior to me getting that job, I was applying for everything. I was applying for, any DNR position, seasonal position, a Department of Natural Resources in Iowa. I was even looking out west for fish and game, willing to build fence for a summer. Yep. An experience that you've had as well.
Yep.
And, just anything. I was even in the process of finishing up my Peace Corps application simply because it would have been an amazing experience as well. But once you get back from Peace Corps, you have X amount of years where you're considered a federal employee. Yeah. And so once you get into that area, it opens up a lot of doors. And the position at the Tulsa Zoo came first. And willing to take that. And I was still in the process of working on my Peace Corps application as I was interning. at the Tulsa Zoo. So, yeah, keeping your opportunities open, being aware of all the possibilities, and like you say, not being afraid to stumble.
Yeah.
Because if you accidentally kill yourself, I guess that would be a failure, right?
Sure.
But you can stumble and get up and move again, or move in a different direction. And I think that goes along with this idea of change. I've never been a person who's afraid of change. I've always embraced it because change is important. Change leads to growth. And if it doesn't work, change. Mm-hmm. You didn't fail. You failed if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and nothing ever changes.
Sure. And I have a very similar perspective. I mean, one of the times I'm probably like the most efficient worker is in a completely new situation, right? When we first went into COVID lockdown, I felt energized for 3 months. Like, oh, okay, this is like, I'm going to figure out something different. And I don't want at all to like say that's better than a completely different type of personality that, might have been kind of, felt very constrained in that situation, or, just doesn't want to have to do that. They want that stability. They want to know what they're going into every day. But I think that it's important for both sides, to learn where you're at. Are you the type of person who wants stability? That's great. Mm-hmm. Think about how to add how to take a little bit of risk,
right.
Just to you're going to figure out something about yourself. And for, myself on the other side, I often have to kind of rein myself in and be like, I'm maybe already looking at, I'll start a career and be looking at that next one. Well, that one looks exciting and completely different. And thinking about like, wait, now health insurance is a good thing.
Right. Retirement's a good thing as well.
Yeah.
And I totally get that because prior to here, it was about every 5 years, I'd kind of get the itch and move to a different zoo. And the nice thing is they were never just laterals. So when I did move, I moved up into a higher up position. And so I was gaining experience and moving up, and I wasn't moving just for the sake of moving, but that itch did hit me. And coming here, you realize not only is Pocatello an amazing community, it's a place that I do want to stay. And there's so many things that Pocatello offers. And, I've been almost everywhere in the United States for a period of time, and I really do enjoy Pocatello. What I've had to learn here at Zoo Idaho is that you can slow down. You don't need to always be pushing that progress button every single year. And if you keep doing that, you will get tired. And there's that chance of burnout, of course. Mm-hmm. And so slowing down and still making progress, still creating change, but moving, like you said, there's some people who want that stability and consistency. We do need that.
Yes.
And so accepting that this aspect of my job is a stable, consistent aspect, but this little piece over here, for instance, with the development or marketing end of it, it's an avenue that I'm exploring and I'm learning, and so that's where I can kind of take that change and take that progress, because I've got a lot of the husbandry experience. Let's move into this direction, and I can still grow, and you can still get that excitement in the sense of learning something new, and you still stumble because you're learning new things, but you still have that measure of stability. So finding a little bit of that balance is important.
Right. And I think that it's something that, at least for myself, I've had to learn can be incorporated into just about any job once you're kind of aware of your strengths and your weaknesses, and aware of the fact that, stumbling isn't going to necessarily get you fired.
No, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't.
It'll probably make you a better employee.
Oh, totally.
Along the way.
And I do have to say, Mark, I absolutely love when you talked about knowing your strengths and your weaknesses. And over the years, having to interview and hire people. And one of the questions that I absolutely hate, and I hope everyone who listens and they have to write up interview questions, I hope they remove it, because it's a bad question. And it's when someone says, what are your strengths and or weaknesses, especially the weaknesses. When you're going through an interview process, as the person conducting the interview, you should be, based off of your questions, knowing full well what this individual's strengths are. Yeah. And when I'm going to hire someone, I'm not hiring them because of their weaknesses. I'm hiring them because their strengths meet and fit into my needs at the zoo or whatever organization I'm running or working within. And I've even gotten to the point where someone's called me for a reference and they ask, what's this person's weaknesses? And I told them I'm not going to answer that question because it's a bad question. You need to hire that person based on their strengths, and here are their strengths. So don't look at your weaknesses and say, I need to improve my weaknesses, because if you do that, you're just going to be an average person. Look at your strengths. How can you continue to improve your areas where you're strong at? And then, you're going to have some improvements on your weaknesses, but really focus in on your strengths and what you love to do. Yeah. And move forward with those.
Yeah, I like that. I'd be okay never having to answer that question again.
Yeah, again, it's not a good question. Don't worry about your weaknesses. Worry about what you can offer, not only the organization that you're working in or applying for, but your community and your friends and your significant others. Find some confidence in yourself, and everyone has strengths.
Yeah, I love it.
Run with it.
As we wrap up here, do you have any advice for career seekers out there, from people just starting off in college to maybe someone mid-career thinking about a change? What would you say to them?
So I think with college, as you're trying to decide what you want to do, take advantage of internship opportunities. When you're in college, you have that chance to just try different things and really find out what you're passionate about and run with it. When I look at resumes, and if I'm looking at hiring someone within a zoo, I feel it's important that they have a 4-year degree because it shows a measure of commitment. Sure. A 2-year degree is fantastic as well. Then I also look at experience. If you've put yourself out there and you've tried to do some fun internships, and it doesn't even have to be at a zoo. If you're out there experiencing different types of jobs and you're really grasping the internship programs and running with, that's fantastic. And if you're in your mid-career and you want to try something else, again, what's stopping you? Just do it and realize, at one point I thought, well, shoot, after so many years in a zoo, I'm kind of stuck within the zoo world because that's what my career is. That's not the case. As you move into, quote, leadership or management, that's leadership and management experience that can translate into any profession. So don't discount the experiences you have, because those experiences will bring a different viewpoint into any decision that you choose. If you want to do a career change, that experience really does bring a lot of valuable contributions to wherever you choose to go.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thanks for coming in, Peter.
You bet. This is fun.
And that was our conversation with Peter Pruett. You can also hear Peter on Nature of Idaho with another one of our past guests, Leif Tapanua. I love what Peter said there at the end about looking for experience on a resume and getting experience when you're in college. Something we say in our office all the time is it'd be a real shame to graduate with only bachelor's of blank on a resume, because that's what everyone else is going to be graduating with. So take the time, take the chance, and get some experience. Find out what you like, and you're going to be a little more hireable. If you're interested in learning more about your pathway, please feel free to contact the ISU Career Center at isu.edu/career. Likewise, if you're interested in hearing about other people's pathways, you can find all of our past episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and at kisu.org/pathways. Likewise, tune in to KISU the second Wednesday of every month at 7:30 to hear the radio broadcast. From the Idaho State University Career Center, this is Mark Beaver, wishing you a fantastic rest of your day.